They had conquered 17 species across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their empire stretched across 1,000 worlds, and on each of those worlds the same story had played out, the same method, the same result. Commander Al had personally overseen the subjugation of 6 species, and he had learned that violence was not the most effective weapon. Fear was. They did not attack military bases. They did not bomb cities. They did not engage in the messy business of prolonged warfare. Instead, they targeted the young, schools, learning centers, places where species gathered their children and left them vulnerable. Once you held the children, parents stopped fighting. Governments surrendered. Entire civilizations bent their knees rather than watch their offspring suffer. It was elegant, it was efficient, it had never failed. Earth had appeared on sensors 18 months ago. The analysts had studied the blue planet with great interest. The dominant species called themselves humans. They were physically weak by galactic standards. Their technology was primitive. They had not even achieved faster-than-light travel. They spent most of their time fighting each other over resources, ideologies, and invisible lines drawn on maps. The analysts had classified Earth as a Category 2 threat. Minimal resistance expected. Standard subjugation protocol recommended. Commander Al descended upon Earth with 400 warships. His fleet hung in orbit, hidden behind shimmer fields that bent light around their hulls. For 3 days they watched. They gathered intelligence. They identified the optimal target. High school in suburban Ohio. The analysts had chosen it carefully. It was an average school in an average town. No military bases nearby. Good media coverage. Maximum psychological impact. When the humans saw their children taken in broad daylight, when they saw how powerless their leaders were to stop it, they would understand. Resistance was pointless. Submission was the only rational choice. On a Tuesday morning, at exactly 10:47 a.m. local time, the shimmer field dropped. The sky above high school turned dark. 4 transport ships descended through the clouds, their engines humming with a frequency that made human teeth ache. Students in the courtyard looked up and froze. Teachers stopped mid-sentence. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then the shock troops materialized. They appeared in flashes of blue light, teleporting directly onto the school grounds. 200 soldiers in combat armor, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming under Earth's yellow sun. They stood 7 feet tall on average. Their bodies were covered in natural plating that could stop bullets. Their eyes were compound, seeing in spectrums humans could not imagine. Their limbs ended in claws that could tear through steel. The screaming started immediately. Students ran in every direction. Some tried to reach the buildings. Others sprinted for the parking lot. A few simply fell to the ground and covered their heads. Teachers shouted instructions that no one could hear over the chaos. Commander Al materialized in front of the main entrance. He was larger than his soldiers, his carapace marked with the ceremonial scars of his rank. His translation module activated automatically, converting his clicking native language into flawless English. He raised one clawed hand, and his soldiers fired warning shots into the air. The energy pulses were bright blue, loud, and terrifying. The running stopped. The screaming faded to whimpers. "Humans," Al announced, his amplified voice echoing across the campus. "I am Commander Al of the 3rd Subjugation Fleet. Your planet is now under control. Resistance is not recommended. Cooperation will be rewarded. Defiance will be punished." He paused, letting his words sink in. Around him, his soldiers began herding students into groups. Some humans cried. Others prayed to gods that would not answer. A teacher tried to protest and was knocked unconscious with a single blow. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Al walked through the main entrance, flanked by his personal guard. The doors had been blown open by his advance team. Glass crunched under his armored feet. The hallway beyond was long and lined with metal containers that humans used to store their belongings. Primitive, inefficient, like everything else about this species. He was preparing his next announcement when he noticed the girl. She stood in the center of the hallway, perhaps 30 feet ahead. She had not run. She had not hidden. She was simply standing there, a bag of learning materials hanging from one shoulder, looking at him. Al stopped walking. The girl was young by human standards. 16 solar cycles, perhaps, small, thin. Dark hair pulled back from her face. Nothing about her physical appearance suggested any threat whatsoever. She should have been cowering like the others. Instead, she was looking at him with an expression that his cultural database could not categorize. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was not even curiosity. It was something closer to annoyance, as if he were a minor inconvenience in her day. "You are blocking my path," she said. Her voice was flat, calm, utterly without tremor. "I have a calculus test in 3 minutes." Al felt something he had not felt in decades of conquest: confusion. His guards shifted uncomfortably. They had seen many reactions from conquered species: terror, rage, despair, bargaining. They had never seen this. They had never seen a young prey animal stand before a predator and complain about a scheduling conflict. "Did you not hear my announcement?" Al asked. "Your world is being conquered. Your species is being subjugated. You will kneel before the Empire." The girl did not kneel. She did not even blink. "That sounds like a you problem," she said. "I have a test." Behind Al, one of his guards made a sound that might have been laughter, quickly suppressed. The commander felt an unfamiliar sensation rising in his thorax. It took him a moment to identify it as irritation. "Seize this one," he commanded, gesturing toward the girl. "She will serve as our first example. Let the others see what happens to those who show disrespect." 2 of his soldiers moved forward. They were among his best. Each had killed dozens of enemies in close combat. Each was stronger than any human by a factor of 4. Their reflexes were faster. Their armor could withstand small arms fire. Against a single unarmed juvenile human, they had nothing to fear. They were wrong. The girl did not step back. She did not scream for help. She simply shifted her weight slightly, her eyes tracking both soldiers with a focus that seemed almost mechanical. Something was about to happen, something that would change everything. Commander Al did not know it yet, but he had just made the worst mistake of his long and decorated career. He had targeted a school, just like he had done 17 times before. But this time, he had targeted the wrong girl. Her name was Maya, and she had stopped being afraid a long time ago. When she was 7 years old, a drunk driver had crossed the center line on Highway 71 and hit her parents' car head-on. She had been in the back seat. She had watched her mother die. She had held her father's hand as the light left his eyes. The rescue workers had found her 3 hours later, still holding that hand, not crying, not screaming, just waiting. The psychologists said she was in shock. They said she would process her grief in time. They were wrong. Maya had processed everything in those 3 hours, sitting in the wreckage of her childhood. She had learned the most important lesson of her life. The universe did not care about her. Bad things happened to good people. Pain was inevitable. Fear was a choice. After that, she had bounced through 6 foster homes in 4 years. Some were neglectful. Some were cruel. In one, an older boy had tried to hurt her. She had broken his nose with her forehead and walked to the police station alone. She was 10 years old. At 11, she had landed with Samuel, a retired Marine Corps sergeant with no children of his own and a lifetime of regrets. He had not tried to be her father. He had not tried to fix her. Instead, he had recognized something in her eyes, something hard and cold and unbreakable, and he had decided to teach her how to use it. "Fear is a tool," he had told her on her first day in his house. "It keeps most people alive, but you're not most people, are you, kid?" She was not. By the time she was 16, Maya knew 17 ways to disable an attacker with her bare hands. She knew how to control her breathing, her heart rate, her adrenaline. She knew that the human body was fragile, that joints bent in certain directions and broke in others, that nerve clusters existed in predictable locations. She had been bullied relentlessly in middle school. The other children had sensed something different about her, something that made them uncomfortable. They had pushed and mocked and tried to break her. One day, in 8th grade, 3 boys had cornered her behind the gymnasium. They had expected her to cry. They had expected her to beg. Instead, she had looked at them with those flat, empty eyes and said, "The first one to touch me loses teeth. The second one loses an eye. The third one, I haven't decided yet." They had believed her. They had walked away. No one had bullied her since. Now, standing in the hallway of high school, Maya looked at the 2 alien soldiers approaching her and felt nothing. They were bigger than the boys behind the gymnasium. They were armed. They were armored. They were not human. It did not matter. They were threats. Samuel had taught her what to do with threats. The first soldier reached for her with a clawed hand. He was fast by standards, his arm extending in a blur that would have been impossible for a human to match. He expected her to stumble backward, to fall, to make herself easy to grab. Maya did not move backward. She moved forward. The soldier's reach became a liability. She was inside his guard before his brain could process the change. Her elbow came up hard, driving into the gap between his chest plates where the armor was weakest. It was a gap meant for flexibility, a design flaw in the exoskeleton that the species had never needed to address because no prey had ever gotten close enough to exploit it. The impact drove the air from his lungs. His compound eyes went wide with shock and pain. Maya was already moving. Her knee came up, striking the nerve cluster at the base of his thorax. It was a guess, based on the way his body was structured, based on instinct and training, and the cold calculation that ran constantly in the back of her mind. Insects had nerve clusters. This thing looked like an insect. The cluster would be low and central. She was right. The first soldier collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. 1 second had passed. The second soldier was faster than the first. He had seen what happened to his companion and his training kicked in. He raised his pulse rifle, the weapon humming as it charged. At this range, he could not miss. The energy blast would burn through Maya's chest before she could blink. But the weapon had to charge. It took half a second, and Maya was not where she had been. She ducked under the barrel as it rose, her hand catching the soldier's wrist and twisting. The pulse rifle discharged into the ceiling, sending tiles and dust raining down. Maya kept twisting, using the soldier's own strength against him, the way Samuel had taught her. The rifle came free. She reversed it in her hands. The trigger mechanism was different from human weapons, but not that different. She found the firing stud by touch and aimed the barrel at the soldier's faceplate. He froze. 3 seconds had passed since the first soldier reached for her. The hallway was silent. Commander Al stood motionless, his compound eyes fixed on the impossible scene before him. His guards had their weapons raised, but they did not fire. Their training required them to protect their commander, and the girl was not threatening the commander. She was threatening their comrade. "I told you," Maya said, her voice still flat, still calm. "I have a calculus test." She did not lower the weapon. She did not take her eyes off the frozen soldier, but she was aware of everything around her. The other students pressed against the lockers, the teachers staring in shock, the aliens surrounding her. She was outnumbered. She should have been terrified. But Maya had not felt terror since she was 7 years old, sitting in a wrecked car, holding her father's cooling hand. Commander Al found his voice. "Kill her," he ordered. 20 soldiers raised their weapons. And then something happened that changed everything. The students had been frozen against the walls, paralyzed by fear and shock. They had watched Maya move, watched her fight, watched her refuse to show fear, and something in them had shifted. Tyler, the starting linebacker for the Tigers, grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall. He did not know why he was doing it. He only knew that he had watched a girl half his size take down 2 alien soldiers, and if she could do that, he could do something too. Emma, who had been crying against her locker 30 seconds ago, picked up the blade that had fallen from the first soldier's belt. Her hands were shaking, but she held it anyway. A teacher named Mr. emerged from a classroom with a baseball bat. He had been a boxer in college, a lifetime ago. He had told himself he was too old to fight. He had been wrong. They did not understand what they were seeing. On every other world, overwhelming force produced submission. Fear paralyzed prey. This was biological law, proven across 17 conquered species. But Maya had not shown fear. And because she had not shown fear, neither did they. "You know what's funny?" Maya said, her voice carrying through the hallway. "We've been doing active shooter drills since kindergarten. We know how to hide. We know how to run. And some of us," she smiled, and there was nothing warm in it, "some of us know how to fight." She looked at the alien commander with those flat, empty eyes. "You think you're scary?" she asked. "You're not even in the top 5 scariest things that have happened at this school." The first soldier charged. 7 seconds had passed since it all began. The hallway exploded into chaos. The hallway became a war zone in the span of a heartbeat. Tyler swung the fire extinguisher like a baseball bat. The metal cylinder connected with a soldier's head, the impact ringing through the corridor like a bell. The alien stumbled, his compound eyes flickering with confusion. He had been shot at before. He had been stabbed before. He had never been hit with a fire suppression device by a panicked teenager. Before he could recover, Tyler pulled the pin and sprayed white chemical foam directly into his face. The screamed, clawing at his eyes. His species saw in ultraviolet and infrared spectrums that humans could not perceive. The foam blocked all of it. He was blind. Emma did not know how to use the alien blade she held. She did not need to. When a soldier turned toward Tyler, she drove the weapon into the gap behind his knee, the same gap Maya had exploited moments before. The alien fell, and Emma was already moving, grabbing a younger student and pulling her toward the nearest classroom. Mr.'s baseball bat cracked against a soldier's rifle, knocking the weapon aside. The alien swung at him with a clawed hand but had been a middleweight boxer. He ducked the blow and drove the bat's end into the soldier's throat. Even aliens needed to breathe. Maya was everywhere at once. She moved through the chaos like a ghost, the stolen pulse rifle firing in controlled bursts. She did not aim for center mass where the armor was thickest. She aimed for joints, for eyes, for the places where chitin met chitin and flexibility trumped protection. 3 more soldiers fell. Commander Al watched in disbelief. This was not possible. 17 species had fallen to the using this exact method. Children were leverage. Children were hostages. Children were not supposed to fight back. But these children were fighting. A soldier grabbed a freshman by the throat, lifting him off the ground. He intended to use the boy as a shield, to force the other humans to stand down. It was standard tactical doctrine. The boy bit him. Human teeth were not designed for combat. They were blunt, meant for grinding plant matter and cooked meat. But they were backed by jaw muscles that could generate 200 pounds of pressure per square inch, and the boy bit down on the alien's finger joint with every ounce of strength in his body. The soldier screamed and dropped him. A girl in a cheerleading uniform hit the distracted alien with a textbook. The book weighed 4 pounds and contained the complete history of Western civilization. When it struck the soldier's temple, he went down. The violence spread like fire. In the science wing, Mrs., who had taught chemistry for 23 years, remembered what she had learned in graduate school about exothermic reactions. She mixed compounds that should never be mixed and threw the resulting concoction at an advancing squad. The flash and heat sent them scrambling backward. In the shop class building, Mr. and his students emerged with improvised weapons, nail guns, welding torches, a chainsaw that Jimmy Parker had been forbidden to touch until he turned 18. Jimmy was 17 years and 364 days old. He touched it anyway. In the cafeteria, 3 lunch ladies named, and Rose defended the kitchen with boiling oil, industrial knives, and a lifetime of experience dealing with difficult customers. They were the most difficult customers they had ever encountered. It did not slow them down. Had survived an abusive husband, had raised 4 children on minimum wage. Rose had escaped a war zone in her home country when she was 12 years old. The aliens were terrifying, but these women had seen worse. The resistance was spreading beyond the school. Someone had been when the attack began. A student named Williams had pulled out his phone out of pure instinct, the way his generation documented everything. He had captured Maya's first moments of combat. He had captured the fire extinguisher attack. He had captured the cheerleader with the textbook. The video hit social media in seconds. Within minutes, it had been viewed 1,000,000 times. Across Ohio, people watched their screens in shock. Across America, news networks interrupted regular programming. Across the world, humans saw what was happening at high school. They saw aliens. They saw invasion. They saw their worst science fiction nightmares coming true. And they saw a teenage girl stand unmoved before a monster and complain about a calculus test. They saw children fighting back. Something ancient stirred in the human species, something that had been sleeping for generations, lulled by peace and comfort and the illusion of safety. Something that remembered what it meant to be prey in a dangerous universe and what it meant to become predator instead. In Lowe's Angels, a man who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan grabbed his hunting rifle and got in his car. He did not know where he was going. He only knew that he was going. In Chicago, a grandmother who had marched for civil rights in 1963 called her and told them to be ready. Ready for what? They asked. For whatever comes, she answered. In New York, in Miami, in Seattle, in towns and cities across the nation, humans stopped what they were doing and watched the screens. And in their eyes, something changed. At high school, Commander Al finally understood that something had gone terribly wrong. His soldiers were falling. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to shatter the illusion of invincibility that made the method work. His troops were better armed, better trained, better armored. They should have swept through this building in minutes. Instead, they were being slowed, harassed, hurt. By children. He reached for his communication device. All units fall back to defensive positions. Prepare for orbital support. The words felt like acid in his throat. He had never called for orbital support against a school before. He had never needed to. His communications officer's voice crackled through the device. The sound was wrong, panicked in a way Al had never heard from one of his own kind. Commander, we have a problem. What problem? It's not just this school, it's everywhere. Every target we hit, they're fighting back. Tokyo, Berlin, Sydney, Cairo, the humans are not submitting, they are not negotiating. The officer's voice trembled. They're just fighting. Al looked down the hallway. Maya stood at the center of the chaos, the pulse rifle still in her hands, students rallying around her like soldiers around a war banner. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead. She did not seem to notice. 9 seconds had passed since he gave the order to kill her. He was beginning to realize that it would take more than 9 seconds. It would take more than his soldiers. It might take more than his entire fleet. Because whatever he was facing, it was not the weak, divided, primitive species his analysts had described. It was something else entirely. Sir, his communications officer asked, what are your orders? Commander Al did not answer. He was watching Maya, trying to understand what he was seeing, trying to calculate his next move. He did not yet know that there was no move he could make that would save his invasion. The humans had woken up, and they were just getting started. They had studied human history before the invasion. They knew everything, or they thought they did. They knew about the wars, the endless, bloody conflicts that stretched back to the dawn of human civilization. They knew about the weapons, each generation more destructive than the last, culminating in bombs that could turn cities to ash in an instant. They knew about the violence that humans inflicted on each other, the genocides and purges and revolutions. They had factored all of this into their invasion plan. They had calculated that a species capable of such destruction would be especially vulnerable to psychological warfare. A people who had suffered so much would surely choose surrender over more suffering. They were wrong. What they did not understand, what their analysts had failed to grasp, was that humans did not fight because they were strong. Humans fought because they were afraid. They fought because they had to. They fought because something deep in their evolutionary code told them that survival required resistance, that giving up meant death. And they fought hardest when they were protecting something. In Tokyo, a strike team targeted an elementary school inn. They expected easy victory. They found 500 parents who had been nearby when the attack began, parents who had seen the video from Ohio, parents who had armed themselves with kitchen knives and broken furniture, and a fury that transcended language. The strike team retreated. In Berlin, they targeted a university. The students there had grown up with stories of their grandparents, stories of occupation and resistance and the price of freedom. Within an hour, the campus was a fortress. In Cairo, in Johannesburg, in Mumbai, in the pattern repeated. They came expecting submission. They found war. Not organized war, not military war, something older and more dangerous. The war of a species that had clawed its way to the top of its planet's food chain, that had faced extinction a dozen times and survived through sheer stubborn refusal to die. At high school, the tide had turned completely. The hallways were thick with smoke from Mrs. Chemical fires. The air smelled of blood and fear and something else, something electric and dangerous. Soldiers lay where they had fallen, some unconscious, some wounded, some not moving at all. The humans had paid a price too. Students with broken bones, teachers with burns. Mister had taken a pulse blast to the shoulder and was still swinging his bat with his other arm. A freshman named Carlos had been stabbed and was being dragged to safety by his friends while someone tried to stop the bleeding. But they were still fighting. Commander Al stood at the center of the chaos, surrounded by what remained of his personal guard. He had called for reinforcements 3 times. They were not coming. His ships were occupied elsewhere, dealing with resistance that had not been anticipated, fighting battles that should not have been necessary. His communications officer's voice came through again, even more panicked than before. "Commander, we are losing containment in 17 sectors. Human military forces are mobilizing. Their primitive aircraft are attempting to engage our ships. They cannot penetrate our shields, but..." "But what?" "They are not retreating, sir. They take casualties and they keep coming. Our psychological warfare teams report complete failure. The humans are not responding to fear protocols. They are not negotiating. They are not even communicating demands. They are simply attacking." Al watched a human boy, no more than 14 years old, tackle one of his soldiers from behind. The boy had no weapon. He simply wrapped his arms around the soldier's head and held on while his friends beat the alien with whatever they had in their hands. "Sir," the communications officer said, "Fleet Command is asking for reassessment. They want to know if the planet is worth the cost." The planet was worth billions. Earth was rich in resources, its population a potential labor force for industry. It was why they had come here in the first place. But conquest required submission, and these humans were not submitting. "Tell Fleet Command we may need to reconsider our approach," Al said. The words tasted like defeat. This species is not responding as predicted. Commander, there is something else. The human communication networks are spreading information faster than we can suppress it. The video from this location has been viewed over 100 million times. Humans are organizing resistance through their primitive electronic networks. They are sharing tactical information. They are learning our weaknesses in real time. Al thought of Maya, of the way she had found the gaps in his soldier's armor by pure instinct. She had not known those gaps existed. She had figured it out on the spot, in the middle of combat, under conditions that would have paralyzed any rational being. And now, through their communication networks, every human on the planet was learning what she had learned. They were adapting. They were sharing. They were becoming more dangerous with every passing minute. "One more thing, Commander," the communications officer said. "Long-range sensors have detected movement in the outer system, human spacecraft. They appear to be mining vessels and research stations, but they are changing course. They are coming toward Earth." "Mining vessels are not a threat." "No, sir, but their cargo might be. They are carrying industrial equipment, explosives, and their communication traffic suggests they are not planning to evacuate. They are planning to fight." Humans in space, humans with explosives, humans who had been watching the invasion from millions of miles away and had decided to come home and join the battle. Al looked at Maya again. She was rallying students, organizing them into groups, directing them toward defensible positions. She was bleeding from half a dozen cuts now, but her eyes were the same, flat, calm, utterly without fear. He had conquered 17 species. He had never seen anything like this. "Commander," the officer asked, "your orders?" Al did not answer immediately. He was calculating. His forces could still win this battle. They could still take this school. But the cost would be higher than anticipated, and the victory would mean nothing if the entire planet rose up the same way. The method worked because it was efficient. Minimal casualties, maximum psychological impact. Once word spread that the invaders were unstoppable, resistance crumbled. But word was spreading that the invaders could be stopped, that children could fight back, that a teenage girl with no weapons and no armor could defeat soldiers in single combat. The psychological advantage was gone. "Begin withdrawal procedures," Al said finally. "All units fall back to extraction points." "Sir, we are retreating." "We are reassessing." Al's voice was cold. "This planet has been misclassified. It is not a Category 2 threat. It is something else entirely. We need to report our findings before committing further resources." Around him, his remaining guards began moving toward the exits. They were disciplined, covering each other's retreat, maintaining formation even as students threw whatever they could find at their backs. Maya did not pursue. She stood in the center of the hallway watching them go, the pulse rifle still in her hands. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. 10 seconds had passed since the first soldier reached for her. In those 10 seconds, everything had changed. They were retreating. And the humans were just beginning to understand what they were capable of. The retreat did not go as Commander Al had planned. His soldiers made it to the courtyard, fighting through pockets of resistance all the way. Students with improvised weapons, teachers who had forgotten how to be afraid, a janitor named Frank who had served in 2 wars and had been waiting his whole life for one more chance to matter. But outside was worse. Word had spread through the human communication networks. Parents had come. Police had come. Military vehicles were pulling up to the school's perimeter. Above, human aircraft circled like predators waiting for wounded prey. The shields could stop their weapons, but the humans did not seem to care. They kept coming anyway, kept pushing, kept fighting. Al's personal guard formed a protective circle around him. They were the best soldiers in the fleet, veterans of dozens of campaigns. They had never looked afraid before. They looked afraid now. "Commander," one of them said, "the extraction ships cannot land. The humans are firing anti-aircraft weapons. The shots cannot penetrate our shields, but the pilots cannot risk landing in these conditions." Al looked up at the sky. His ships were there just beyond the clouds, waiting to carry him to safety, and he could not reach them. Because humans with primitive weapons were making it impossible. "Fight through," he ordered. "Clear a landing zone." His guards advanced, and they fell. Not all at once, not easily, but they fell. A police officer with a shotgun found the joint gap behind a soldier's knee. A parent with a hunting rifle hit a soldier's eye. A teenager with a baseball bat and nothing to lose tackled a guard from behind and held on while others swarmed over them both. One by one the guards fell, until only Al remained. He stood in the courtyard of high school, surrounded by humans on every side. His armor was scorched. His communication device was broken. His guards lay around him, unconscious or worse. The humans did not attack. They simply stood there, watching, waiting, a circle of predators who had cornered their prey. Maya walked through the crowd. They parted for her without a word, the way soldiers part for a commanding officer. She still carried the pulse rifle. Her face was covered in blood and dust, and something that might have been soot from the chemical fires. She stopped in front of Commander Al. "It's over," she said. Al drew himself up to his full height. He was still taller than her by 2 feet. His species was still stronger, still faster, still more advanced. He was still commander of the 3rd Subjugation Fleet. "My fleet will destroy your cities," he said. "Billions will die. You have won nothing." Maya did not flinch. "Maybe, but you'll lose too, and something tells me your bosses don't like losing." She was right. Al knew she was right. The empire expanded through conquest, but it only kept what could be held cheaply. A planet that fought back, that refused to submit, that made every occupation a bleeding wound, was not worth having. Earth was not worth having. "You made a mistake," Maya said. She lowered the rifle, resting it against her shoulder. "You thought we were soft because we built schools instead of fortresses. You thought we were weak because we teach children instead of training soldiers." She stepped closer, close enough that Al could see his own reflection in her eyes, close enough that he could see how young she really was, how small, how utterly human. "We build schools because of what we are," she said. "We try to teach our children to be better than us, because deep down we know what we're capable of. Every human you see has a monster sleeping inside them. We spend our whole lives learning to keep it asleep." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You woke it up." Commander Al looked into her eyes and saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He saw emptiness. Not cruelty, not rage, not triumph, just absence, a hollow space where fear should have been. He had conquered 17 species. He had faced warriors and soldiers and defenders of every kind. He had never seen anything like Maya. She was not a warrior, she was not a soldier, she was something worse. She was what humans became when they had nothing left to lose. "Tell your fleet to leave," she said. "Tell your empire that Earth is off limits. Tell them that if they ever come back we will be waiting, and next time we won't just defend." She smiled, and there was nothing human in it. "Next time we'll follow you home." 17 minutes later the fleet broke orbit. The ships accelerated away from Earth at maximum speed, their shimmer fields engaged, their weapons powered down. They did not look back. The official report would classify Earth as a Category Omega threat. It was the highest classification in their system, reserved for species too dangerous to subjugate. The recommended action was simple: avoid contact, avoid provocation, avoid Earth. The report would note that the invasion had failed in under an hour. It would note that resistance had been immediate, coordinated, and devastatingly effective. It would note that the humans had displayed tactical adaptation beyond any known species. But the report would not mention Maya by name. It would not mention the calculus test, or the fire extinguisher, or the lunch ladies with their boiling oil. It would not capture what had really happened in that hallway, in those 10 seconds, in that moment when a species that should have surrendered chose to fight instead. Some things could not be put into reports. Maya made it to her calculus test. Her teacher, Mrs., had barricaded herself in the classroom with a dozen students and a desk lamp she had been planning to use as a weapon. When Maya walked in, covered in blood and carrying an alien rifle, Mrs. stared at her for a long moment. Then she handed her the test. "You have 45 minutes, Mrs. said. No calculators." Maya sat down, picked up a pencil, and began to work. She got a B+. Afterward, she walked out of the school into a world that had changed forever. News helicopters circled overhead. Military vehicles lined the streets. Parents clutched their children like they might disappear at any moment. Samuel, the Marine who had taught her how to fight, was waiting by the curb. He had driven from his house at 90 miles an hour, listening to the radio, praying for the first time in 30 years. When he saw Maya, he did not speak. He simply opened his arms. She walked into his embrace and held on tight. "I'm okay," she said. "I know," he answered. "I watched the video. You were magnificent." "I was scared." Samuel pulled back and looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time since he had known her, there were tears in Maya's eyes. "Good," he said. "That means you're still human." Around them, the world tried to make sense of what had happened. Governments issued statements. Scientists demanded explanations. Religious leaders proclaimed miracles and warnings in equal measure. But Maya did not care about any of that. She leaned against her foster father's chest and listened to his heartbeat. She was alive. Her classmates were alive. The aliens were gone. And somewhere, deep inside her, in the place where she had locked away everything that hurt, something began to heal. She had spent 9 years learning not to feel, 9 years building walls around her heart, 9 years convincing herself that the universe did not care about her. But the universe had sent monsters to her school, and she had beaten them. Maybe the universe did care after all. Maybe she could too. The sun was setting over high school, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The ships were gone, scattered to the stars, carrying tailies of a planet that should never be touched. And on the steps of the school, surrounded by the debris of battle and the hope of survival, humanity took its first step toward the stars. They would not be prey. Not ever again.